In the year 793 AD, as the June wind carried the scent of salt and blood across the North Sea, a few sails appeared on the horizon. The first rays of the sun turned the sea into a silver armor, and those ships advanced toward a small island on the eastern coast of England, Lindisfarne. While the monks of St. Cuthbert's Monastery were wrapped in the stillness of morning prayers, they were shaken by the war cries coming from the north. Iron axes smashed stone walls. Sacred objects were mercilessly plundered, and most of the monks were either cut down by the sword or consumed by the flames. The smoke that descended upon the island that day was not only a sign of a monastery's destruction, but the omen of a new age. It was known that Vikings had made small raids on the coasts of England and Ireland before, but the targeting of a holy site echoed through the heart of Europe. This attack was the moment when fear and fascination were born at the same time. Today, historians regard this day as the beginning of the Viking Age. In the centuries that followed, the warriors of the North would rewrite the fate of Europe. From 865 onward, England was gradually invaded, and by the early 11th century, the Danish crown ruled over British lands. In the north of France, in the region now known as Normandy, a new Viking lineage took root. The northern wind, once remembered only for storms, now carried the name of a people, the Vikings. Their traces became visible everywhere, from the icy bays of the north to the warm harbors of the Mediterranean. Yet, in 1066, with the death of Harold Hardrada during his last great campaign in England, this age came to its close. As centuries passed, history turned into stories, and stories into legend. In the 13th and 14th centuries, especially in Iceland, northern storytellers began to write down the sagas of old kings. These pages spoke of battles, betrayals, and men who defied the gods. And some of these sagas spoke of a man who had once sat on the thrones of Sweden and Denmark, who had struck fear into the coasts of France and England, a name whispered through the ages, carved into stone: Ragnar Lodbrok. Ragnar's name echoed not only the tale of a warrior, but the legacy of a lineage. Most of the sagas that mention him trace his origins back to the legendary Scandinavian king Sigurd Ring. Sigurd Ring ruled Sweden and Denmark in peace for many years and was remembered as much for his justice as for his power. Sigurd's daughter, Ayud, married Boron, a king from distant Slavic lands, and their union produced two sons, Harold and Randvir. When Sigurd died, the crown passed to his son. But after the great king's death, the balance of the north shifted. His nephew, Harold, became king of Denmark, while his son, Sigurd, ruled Sweden. The sagas say little about this period, but what they do tell is that Harold sought to rule Sweden from the shadow of the Danish throne. This tension reached its peak on the plains of Bravalla. The battle was filled with blood, smoke, and screams. Harold lost both his army and his life that day. Thus, the two kingdoms were once again united under a single ruler. Different versions of the Icelandic sagas claim that Sigurd ruled Sweden and at times Denmark from the 770s until 804. His story intersects with another one echoing through the mountains of the north. His marriage to Alfhild, princess of a small kingdom in southern Norway. From this union was born a child who would one day etch his own name into history, Ragnar Lodbrok. The sagas that recount Ragnar's life focus less on the battlefields and more on his passions and choices. Yet even this alone forms a tale of heroism. The women he married were not ordinary women, but souls walking the boundary of fate. His first wife was Thora, whom he won by slaying a monster covered in dragon skin. After her came a woman described in the sagas as walking beside him in battle, a woman whose pride was as sharp as her sword, Lagertha. Her name appears only in the 12th century Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum, which is why scholars have long doubted whether she ever truly lived. His third wife appears in the most poignant love stories of the sagas, Aslog, daughter of the dragon slayer Sigurd and the shield maiden Brynhild. Ragnar's marriage to her was woven with both passion and prophecy. It is said that Ragnar had at least 8 children from these marriages. But some names push beyond the pages of sagas into the records of real history. Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, Hvitserk, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Each became a warrior who shaped the destiny of his age. According to the saga of Ragnar Lodbrok, written in the 13th century, these children grew into the greatest warriors of the north. Their fame grew so immense that Ragnar's own story began to fade among the sagas of his sons. For a king, this was an unforgivable fate. To reclaim his honor, Ragnar one day bid farewell to the north with 3 ships, taking with him only his most trusted men. His goal was simple: to conquer England with a small force and restore the glory of his former days. But this time, the wind did not blow in his favor. Ella, king of Northumbria, captured him. The king had heard of Ragnar's fame. They said no weapon could kill him. Thus, he made Ragnar's death different. He had him thrown into a pit filled with venomous snakes. Until that day, England had endured many disasters from the north. But this time, what approached was not disaster. It was vengeance. When Ragnar's sons learned of their father's death, they were consumed by a fury that set the seas ablaze. Thousands of warriors, hundreds of ships sailed west. That great expedition ended with Ella's death and the Vikings taking much of England. As Ragnar Lodbrok's tale wandered through the misty valleys of legend, it took on a different meaning in the eyes of historians. The Icelandic sagas tell a myth woven of heroism. History, seeking truth, attempts to peel back the layers of this tale, one by one. Like many medieval heroic narratives, the saga of Ragnar Lodbrok is embellished with extraordinary and fantastical elements. Some sources say he fought a dragon to win Thora's hand. The dragon, often a symbol of power and fear, may well be the reflection of Ragnar's struggle against his own fate. Yet, historians approach such accounts with caution. To them, what matters is not Ragnar's literal existence, but how much of his story touches reality. For nearly all the sagas we know were written about 3 centuries after Ragnar is believed to have lived, blurring the line between legend and history. So then, is it possible to trace the real Ragnar? Or is the true question this: can the strands of truth and myth knotted together within these tales ever be separated? The answer comes from an unexpected place. Historians seeking the real Ragnar turn not to his story, but to the stories of his sons. For the most reliable traces we have belong to them. Some of the sons mentioned in medieval records are now known to have truly lived. Bjorn Ironside carried out raids along the Seine River against the cities of France between 857 and 875. Ivar the Boneless was one of the leaders of the great Viking army that shook England in 865. According to tradition, he died in Dublin in 873. Ube is thought to have been killed in a battle near Devon in 878. These names were not only heroes of the sagas, they were real figures recorded in the history of the 9th century. Yet here, a contradiction emerges. In Anglo-Saxon and Frankish records of the Middle Ages, not a single word is mentioned about these men's father. No document confirms that Ivar, Ube, Halfdan, or Sigurd were brothers. In historical sources, they appear as independent war leaders, not siblings. Thus, the brotherhood depicted in the sagas is not supported by history. So then, when and how was this bond created? To find the answer, the fog of time must be lifted a little further. The first historical trace of the name Ragnar appears around the year 1070 in the writings of a Norman historian, William of Jumiagus. William writes that the famous warrior Bjorn Ironside's father was a man named Lodbrok. This name soon appears in other sources as well. Adam of Bremen states that the ruthless King Ivar, who invaded England, also had a father named Lodbrok. Over the years, these fragments begin to come together. In the 1120s, the Icelandic writer Ari Thorgilsson used the name Ragnar Lodbrok together for the first time. By the mid-12th century, Ragnar's story was no longer just a rumor. It was a legend, spreading from tongue to tongue. The greatest warriors of the 9th century were now remembered as his sons. And from that moment on, Ragnar ceased to be a historical figure. He became an immortal legend. As historians trace Ragnar Lodbrok, they do not encounter a single man, but many faces blurred together over time. Most of these figures were leaders who lived in different eras, but came to share the same shadow. For this reason, historians speak not of the real Ragnar, but of the men who created Ragnar. One of the most widely accepted candidates is the Danish Viking leader who besieged Paris in 845. He advanced up the Seine River with a fleet of 120 ships and about 4,000 warriors, pillaging the city. Frankish historians describe this leader as ruthless, brave, and unstoppable. Some historians write his name as Reginhirus, but in the echo of the sagas, this name gradually transforms into Ragnar. Another possible candidate is the owner of the famous Raven Banner, captured by the English in 878. This banner was said to have been woven by the daughters of Lodbrok. Thus, the name Lodbrok appears once again between the lines of history. When all these records are combined, a clearer idea forms in the minds of historians. Ragnar Lodbrok may never have been a single person. Rather, he is a collective figure woven from the stories of several different Viking leaders who shook Europe throughout the 9th century. A legendary persona created by a generation. Perhaps he has a bit of Reginhirus, a fragment of Lodbrok, and features borrowed from other warriors whose names we do not even know. But whoever he was, his story serves a single purpose: to create a myth where power, lineage, conquest, and divine destiny intertwine. For throughout history, every ruler has sought to ground his legitimacy in a myth. The kings of Sparta traced their descent to Heracles. Romulus, the founder of Rome, was the son of the god Mars. The same pattern unfolded in the north. From the late 9th century onward, some Viking kings also needed a similar story to strengthen their rule. Guthrum, who invaded England between 865 and 890, and Canute the Great, who united the thrones of England, Norway, and Denmark in the early 11th century. Each traced his lineage back to Ragnar. Ragnar was no longer just a hero, but the root of a dynastic tree on which kingdoms rested. The lands conquered by his sons were considered the sacred inheritance of this lineage. Over time, this narrative deepened so much that in the last phases of the Viking Age, every king who set his eyes on England sought legitimacy by claiming descent from Ragnar. Yet, at some point, guided by the pens of medieval writers, the stories of distinct leaders merged into a single bloodline. A legend was born. The ancestor of all great kings, the inspiration behind all conquests, was united under one name: Ragnar Lodbrok. But the answer to the great question remains uncertain. Did he truly live? Or was his story born from that gray zone where history and imagination blend together? There is no definitive answer. The surviving documents do not allow us to determine how much of Ragnar's story comes from real events and how much from tales passed down through generations. Even today, historians question not Ragnar's existence, but the truth behind the stories attributed to him. And perhaps for this reason, whoever the real Ragnar Lodbrok may have been, he is now immortal. For his name was not born from the cold records of history, but from humanity's enduring belief in legends.